everybody, and welcome to the Are You Screening podcast. I am your host, RUscreening.com's own Mark Eastman, and with me, as always, is co-host extraordinaire Shane Leonard.
Hello.
And, I just realized, instantly, really, literally just realized.
That light is in my eyes? Is that what you realized? I'm hard. I just looked at the camera, and I'm like, what the hell?
That, I think I've got, a Mr. Rogers thing going on. I think I was wearing this last time.
No, that's all right.
It's just the
I
official,
wear this every time.
So the
we're good.
official uniform.
Yeah.
This week we're doing Red One.
That's right.
Because clearly it's Christmas time.
Yeah.
And we have to have a weird Christmas action flick. And as we said last week, we are going to jump into doing, heading back to ages ago.
Yeah.
And doing a critic analysis of ourselves, I guess, and kind of talk about how we come up with our ratings. And, honestly, we should probably throw some of this stuff in every once in a while anyway.
Yeah.
But also, every once in a while, we do get emails from people because of the way we talk about the numbers. So every once in a while, someone will actually, respond to the things that we say repeatedly, we have kind of a shtick about movies that are 7s.
Yeah.
And movies that are 5s, and we will sometimes rate something 2, and we will talk about it in a way that makes it seem like that means something versus other things. Yeah. And we will frequently talk about when we do our best lists, how there are, there was a movie that was a 10 that didn't make it on the best list,
right?
Despite the fact that there weren't more than 10 10s,
right?
Right. So how could that be?
So how can a 10 not be on your best list?
And as we do say most of the time that we do our best list,
right.
Putting together the best list, which, since this is an episode where we're going to be talking about how we rate and things like that, how we come up with the numbers, we can throw out once again, I hate making lists. You love making lists. And then we smush that together every year and make a bunch of lists.
Right.
But making the best of the year list is not, for us anyway, although I'll tell you, for a lot of people it is.
Yeah.
It's not just looking back at all your ratings over the year and going, these are the ones that I rated the highest, and boom, that's the list. Which literally, that is how a lot of people make their list. Yeah. A lot of critics make their list. Anyway, so we're going to dive fairly deep into our, different but
methodology of...
Yeah, we have very different ideas about how we come up with the ratings, even though we rate stuff the same a lot.
Relatively, yeah.
We're at least pretty close.
And for anyone who has not been around a long time, one of the things that we waited for, and I mean we waited years for a divide. One of the things that we were eventually going to come into, you were going to be like, I thought this was a 9, and I'm like, this is a 2. What that's only happened a few times, because annoyingly, most of the time we're within plus or minus of 2 of each other.
Right.
But that's the goal. Try to find a film that he loves and I hate, or vice versa.
Right.
And then defend.
Yeah, and what was that one? There was the first one where we had really a giant divide. I feel like it was the live action.
The Beauty and the Beast one was
pretty good.
Was a big divide. There was only one other one like that. I'd have to look back because I write them all down just because I like making lists.
Yeah, great. Okay, so Red One.
Yeah. Excuse me.
This is, really the craziest movie, and I'll tell you, if it weren't for the fact that somebody got an assload of money for this, right, this would just be any other Christmas, straight to streaming. There's 5 or 6 of them a year, probably things. But somebody got The Rock and Chris Evans to be in this crazy thing, and J.K. Simmons, because why not, right?
Right.
I feel like J.K. Simmons was in this movie, and he was like, I'm not going to be in it unless I get to work out.
Right. Or everyone looks at him working out and they're like, well, we got to put that in.
I feel like the whole thing, this is a weird one for me too, and not to dive right in, but I feel like they had to invent and kind of screw up their whole world building just because J.K. Simmons insisted on working out.
I want a gym in the North Pole.
He has to actually do a lot of running.
Yeah.
There's like a lot of calories being burned.
Yeah.
And it's like, look, man, it's magic, right? Like, but it's not magic because he has the super sciencey, gadgety things that let him do stuff. And it's like, okay, but listen, man, you still don't have time for that. Right. So there's some sort of magic somewhere, something. He's like, nope, I have to work out a lot. So I'm going to have the Rock spotting me.
Right.
And all this other stuff like crumbles around it. And he's like, look, that's
what
we're going to do.
If you're in a world that has a lot of Christmas magic, but also you need to lift weights.
Right.
I mean, some things just don't work,
And you burn X jillion calories. And he knows all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like we talk about how he's some sort of demigod, like all knowing. Like clearly it's like it's just magic.
Right.
But then there's all this other stuff that's like, well, no, it's like we just have the super tech.
Right. We need all-wheel drive.
And then like, the bad guy's a witch and all this stuff. It's such a weird combination of things.
Yeah.
Like, there's a script out there where it's just magic.
Right.
He just goes to all these places by magic, right? That's how they wrote it. And then J.K. Simmons came in and said, well, then why do I have to work out all the time?
Right. And
like, well, then you better fix that.
Well, and then they're like, well, so you don't. And he goes, why do I have to work out all the time?
Exactly.
They're like, oh, all right. Santa wants a gym. I love those stories where magic is like everywhere, but then, somebody is literally like, well, we need our car to be all-wheel drive. And I'm like, you could magic something. Like, no, it's got to be.
No, it's like a big truck.
Or we need an FM
I think
radio
it's
or
really
whatever.
hilarious too. And we're like so like lost and sidetracked. But but this is stupid, so I'll forget. So I have to say it now, right? I think it's hilarious in this movie that you've got magically strong Santa and magically strong The Rock.
Yeah.
And they are the only people who use this gym.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But we still have all the sizes of weights, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like down
Little
to like
ones.
a half a pound.
Yeah.
Because we have to have like the full rack is cooler looking.
Awesome.
And there's a certain, finger exercise I do.
Yeah.
It's so cornball. Anyway, so it's a big time action movie. Even though it's and you see the trailers, there's like the snowmen and we're fighting and it's like, whatever. All this craziness that we have to have. It's not even like action, like just fights like that other Christmas movie.
Violent Night.
Yeah.
With David Harbour.
Which was awesome.
Which was great.
But really was kind of like just fight scenes and maybe like some shooting, right?
Yeah.
But not like the full bore action where we have like all kinds of car chases. And, and all this, the whole gamut of everything that could be an action movie. And this one has, crazy fights, but also like 8 different chases and what starts off with this insane ride he takes down a marble run because we're chasing a car and like all we have the whole world of super action-y adventure, right? Anyway, so but you know what the movie is, and it's Christmas. And before I say what my rating is, I have to say I would totally recommend this, but man, with like some caveats, right? Like you gotta just popcorn this and not pay any attention to anything.
Just try to have fun.
And when somebody throws in some new information, you just go, okay, that's the new information, and we move forward from there. You don't go, wait a minute. It's kind of like if you watch the Harry Potter films, but you weren't ever a fan of the books. And then at some stage they're like, well, here's some magic or here's a problem. And you go, wait, aren't we all flipping wizards. Can't we just, why don't we just
Abracadabra
do this,
something?
right?
Yeah.
And or they tell you about a spell and you're like, well, but we know that spell. Everyone's not learning this in school. There's other wizards that know this spell. They could have just done that. You know, you can't do any of that kind of stuff in this movie. You have to just take it for what it is and go along for the ride. And then you'll have a pretty good time with it, right?
Presumably.
If you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I gave this one 6.5 because I just was not going to go 7.
Holy man, that's amazing.
But it is like a lot of fun, and everyone.
I was really off on you.
Everyone who is insanely charismatic in the realm of movies is in this being insanely charismatic and dragging you along for the ride, and and Chris Evans especially. The Rock is not bad. He's his normal, you know, he's pretty good, right? In most things. But Chris Evans especially, like his whole job is like he enters the scene and it's like, here's the thing. Now quick, don't look at it. And he's like, look, I'm doing this and I'm funny and witty and snarky and whatever. And it's like he's just as soon as they have to reveal some information that, like I'm saying, you should not think about too much. Then it's like, boom, put Chris Evans in. And then we won't pay attention to it. And we'll just move on past. But anyway, I gave it a 6.5.
It's a 2-hour film. It's 2 hours and 3 minutes, but it's a 2-hour film. And in very typical fashion for us, I don't think you'd disagree. This should be 95 minutes. And I know the scenes to cut almost immediately. PG-13 movies like this concern me. That's not right. That's not really the right way to say it. They're a little concerning because when I go into it, I'm like, are you going to lean harder towards the PG side or more towards the R side and just dial it back a little to get the PG-13 rating? We talked about this when we came out of it, just briefly, trying to figure out like who's this for. And I thought about that a little bit because it's not quite profane, and not profane for profanity's sake, but it's not quite adult enough to be for older kids or adults, and it's not quite childish enough because it has some, you know, the snow people are sort of scary, and that fight is sort of not frightening, but it's scary for someone who's like 9.
It's like real
8, you know.
Yeah.
So trying to figure it out, and I was just talking to a friend, and I was like, it's sort of like a double bacon, double cheeseburger. It's exactly for if that person wants that, they're gonna go get it. If you want to see The Rock in a holiday film, just sort of rocking out, here we go. You know, I genuinely thought you were going to be like, you know, this film's only a 3.5, because I think the stuff that we're going to pick apart makes sense. Still, two of the charismatic people in Hollywood, the most charismatic people that you can find in a, you know, in a sort of weird way, Chris Evans is like the poor man's Ryan Reynolds, because this thing screams needing him Deadpooling all the way through it. But that would be a distraction from the story it's trying to tell. I gave it a 6. I pretty close to giving it 5.5 because I thought this is just a little bit better than average. But a better than average Christmas movie is a different genre. Like, I mean, what am I looking for?
You thought I was going to be way lower.
I thought you were going to be much lower.
Oh, okay.
I thought, because there are a lot of things.
How high did you think I was going to be?
There's a lot of things. I genuinely thought you'd be a little bit above 2 or 3, but not much. And I thought probably 3.5 is where he's at, because the complaints and criticisms I think we have are kind of reasonable for it. If the movie didn't have The Rock, if it didn't have Chris Evans, it would probably suffer a lot because they do a lot of the hard work. The thing about the film, really, one of the things about the film that I like the most is they break a rule, which is sort of fun to think of. We're talking about our rating methodology in a bit. They break a rule pretty easily here where they're basically two different people in the same movie. Like, Chris Evans is in a comedy, and The Rock is in like a straight Taken. Like, they took Santa.
Right.
No fun, no jokes, no winky puns, no side eye, no Schwarzenegger commando like quips. I got to get Santa back. And usually when you have two people acting differently in the same movie, it really doesn't work. I actually think that's part of the comedy here. I think that's part of the levity that works for them, although I don't think all the time they try to make Chris Evans funny works.
Right.
Just like I don't think all the times they make The Rock serious works. I love the creativity in the film. I told you, I thought it sort of felt like one of Guillermo del Toro's first films, where there's just so many fun, wild, crazy ideas. Like we're just driving away. I guess I don't want to ruin that part. We're driving from a confrontation, and suddenly there's a haunted piano in the middle of a German forest, and you're like, what the hell? And I'm like, do all of that all day long. Just make those kind of things happen, because it's so weirdly sort of like firing off fireworks with creativity when it does do that. And then when it sort of suffers from lazy stuff that I didn't always appreciate, where Chris Evans is both a combination of a Rube Goldberg machine and Loki. Like he just can see the future, and he's like, well, if I pull that and I move that and these people will run and I can sneak in there, and I'm like, what?
Right. And then I'll grab the thing
and then when I come out, no one will pay attention because I'll snap my fingers over here and point over there, and everyone's a Rube. It's just like, okay, I get it. I'll give you a chance if you're going to come back in on some criticism, because I thought, some of the stuff we were saying outside made a whole lot of sense. The plot doesn't, even in a Christmas movie, make a whole lot of sense when you start thinking of like Lucy Liu coming in and she's like, we're starting to round up all the usual suspects. And you're like, yeah, okay.
But
let's just forget the two most important ones.
Right.
So anyway, I still had, but I had a lot of fun with it. I didn't have enough fun with it to put it in that sweet zone of 7 that we talk about. But I thought in a weird way, it was trying to be earnest. But it's almost like somebody at the Hallmark channel came in and were like, we're going to shake things up.
Right.
Thursdays are guys' Christmas movies. We're going to have Lacey Chabert in them. We're going to have small town, teacher comes home, whatever.
But
we're also going to do this.
Blow up.
We're also going to do these once in a while, so that the guys who traditionally just want to watch Die Hard will have a Christmas film to watch with their sweeties.
Right.
And someone at Hallmark was like, yeah, all right, let's try it. If you can get The Rock, we'll run it. And he's like, done. And you're like, well, what? It just kind of feels. It feels like that. It feels like a little bit.
It feels like a bet that went wrong. Somebody agreed to something they didn't think could happen.
I dare you.
Yeah. And and they're
or like the machete trailers, where they were like in front of Tarantino and Rodriguez's films, where they're like, that's not a real movie, but it'd be great. And he's like, well, I'll film it.
Right.
It just felt like a fun trailer that was a joke, and then somebody's like, yeah, I would do that.
Somebody had Evans and Dwayne Johnson in their pocket already.
Right.
And then we're like, here's a thing, and blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, well, what if I could get them?
Yeah, right.
Oh, if you can get them, sure. I'll do it.
So,
and then we got stuck with it. Yeah. So I think the problem for the movie, and the reason that, in one way of looking at it, it's really garbage. Yeah. But that way of looking at it, the problem with the movie is that, like you said, it's too old for younger people. It's basically too dumb for older people, because all of the narrative problems that it has are ridiculous if you spend any amount of time thinking about it. So it can't be for older people, right? But it still manages to be a lot of fun. If it would have picked where it was going, either way, it would have been a better movie, right? If it was more for young people, we wouldn't have to care, really. I mean, so we get from one place to another in silly ways, and
all right,
we round up the usual suspects just because we have a special effects company that can do a flaming horse thing, so we need that to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, once you're in the movie, and then way later in the movie, they're like, oh yeah, there's like a Christmas witch. And you're like, we need a guy to find Santa when we know there's a Christmas witch? Right. It's like the movie is populated by people who are themselves new to the movie. They don't actually live in this world.
That's right. Yeah.
When we get new information, it's like they do too. Oh, there's Krampus?
Right.
Nobody thought of Krampus before now?
Why wouldn't Grilla go to Krampus and just be like, you're mad too. Let's just do this together. Because obviously you know where it is because you just show up later
Right.
without being called or
Right.
told. So why don't we just do that?
Right.
There's
There's every step of the way, there is
a reasonable question.
there is wait, Santa's been here the whole time. Oh, that's right. We have the super magic thing in the basement that I forgot about conveniently,
Right.
because that's the one thing
Yeah.
that she would need to do blah, 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 blah. And I just kind of,
Yeah.
that
Whoops.
just slipped my mind
Yeah.
that we had. It's been there a long
I'd
time.
look at that person
I'm
and be
really
like,
old
show me where it is and then pack your stuff.
Right.
Like you're fired.
because you have to be in on it. There's
Yeah.
a lot of stuff.
Right.
But then again, that is really challenging a
Yeah.
kid's Christmas movie,
Right.
Which is come on, you can't.
Right.
But
Right.
since it refuses to be a kid's Christmas movie, at some point,
I think that's fair.
that becomes fair,
Yeah.
right? You have to pick what you are. You can't just get the benefit of being a kid's Christmas movie and then not
Yeah.
be a kid's Christmas movie,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
if somebody makes the live action Scooby-Doo and everything that happens is super serious,
Right.
you can't just go, come on, it's Scooby-Doo.
Aren't they
Well,
supposed to
you
run in
have to-
place for a second and
Right,
eat
it's
like 50 treats? And
It's you have to pick.
do you think, I just thought of this, I meant to ask you, even though we were talking about it before. So there's a scene when Lucy Liu, who's the fancy director of mythology and scary things, she tells The Rock, we're bringing all the usual suspects in, and they show this off by showing the Headless Horseman.
Right.
Actually, I meant to, because we were ripping on that, why wouldn't, like you just said, why wouldn't you bring in the two most usual suspects against Santa, which are the Christmas Witch and Krampus? But I actually thought later, is that a tongue-in-cheek nod to The Nightmare Before Christmas, where they can't use Jack Skellington, and they just are we thought maybe Halloween
Yeah,
took Santa. If it is, it needed to be a little bit more obvious. And if it isn't, I'm well, that's a weird coincidence.
It's just a random.
It's just a
mythical
random
creature.
thing. I guess they needed something scary. They couldn't just haul the Easter Bunny,
Right.
and drag him around by his ears. Or her.
I don't know. It's
Anyway.
it was weird. It's something
It's a
that's
fun moment.
It's
But it doesn't make any sense.
it's unlicensed. It's
that's the other
It's
thing.
in the public domain.
Where I'm you
so
can't
can
use
that,
Jack
right?
Skellington, but you could use this as the avatar of Halloween. So anyway.
Pretty soon it's going to have vampires because you just ban vampires themselves.
Everybody-
are just public domain.
Everybody's having a lot of fun in it. In ways that, again, even Grilla is not even quite the same character type that Krampus is. As antagonists, not necessarily the bad guys, but as antagonists, they're also in different films.
Everyone.
It's
is
very
kind
strange.
Everyone is kind of in a different film, and Krampus at one part is you'd almost expect he's a cutscene from Elf or something,
Right?
Because he's kind of goofy,
Right?
But I don't know. Everything is if they would have just picked something like you said, they've got kind of this. It's almost like an Abbott and Costello kind of thing.
Yeah.
He's just
Good...
he's just fully being the straight man.
Yeah.
And he's got this idiot that he's got to
Right.
drag along
Right.
with them or whatever. Right. But they didn't really go
They didn't lean into it
all
enough,
the way
like you
into
said.
that either. Right. They're
Man, that would have been fun if they had.
Everything they're doing
Yeah.
is they're kind of sort of doing it
Yeah.
so that they can do so many different things all at once.
Yeah.
And you gotta and like you said, the movie's long.
Yeah.
And there's 10 minutes of J.K. Simmons working out. It's what the hell, dude?
I will say I liked.
He got he gave him 5% back or
Right.
something if he could
Rock
just
has-
work out a lot.
Rock has a couple super items that give him super elf powers and abilities. I like it, and again, everybody's always trying to figure out how Santa goes down the chimneys. I like how they answer that in this film. I actually really liked the small attention to that one detail while they're absolutely ignoring all the other details that matter.
Right.
Just fun. But I had turned,
except that it still doesn't make any sense.
I turned my head
I mean,
off
it'd be
and was just
great
having
if
popcorn then. I was just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, click your heels.
And you
you're
have
good.
to. I think it's even that is kind of goofy because we've got like the miniaturization thing so that the Rock can be in this fight with these people,
Right.
and use that in certain ways,
Yeah.
right? So that we can just show that it exists,
Right.
even though like he doesn't need to, right? He's like indestructible anyway.
Right.
So why does he have to like dance around with these guys? He could have just
Yeah. It's just to show us later, but
Right. Anyway, so it is really kind of fun, but if this would have picked and done something
Yeah.
and been like more like the adult kind of thing, and as much as there is more than one network
yeah.
spitting out like 18 Christmas
Of
movies
these
a year
all
or
the
something,
time, yeah.
there are only so many Christmas movies still that it's like, you add to the permanent
Yeah.
Christmas roster, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere there might have been a chance for this movie if
Yeah.
they'd have been different, but it's not going to happen. This is not a movie that everyone's going to go, boo, I have
This
to watch
is-
it. Unless you have maybe the right age kids.
I was going to say,
fall
you've got
totally
the
in
right
love
age
with it.
kids, or maybe you've got family coming over and they,
Really
not
like
prudish.
Dwayne Johnson.
not prudish, but yeah, I actually think there's, I think you either do or you don't like him. If you were going to watch a new Christmas film or put it in the rotation, I'd still pick Violent Night over this. I would
Yeah.
watch Violent Night before I watch this again, which is not
Yeah.
necessarily a slight on this.
Because
it's
it's
just
awesome.
It's dedicated to a lane, and then it's like we'll go all in on that lane.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised you like this movie more than me.
Yeah.
And ratings wise, you definitely did.
I think
but
that
because you came out a little hard on
it
it.
had enough fun. Well, yeah, because I mean,
It was fresh, but still.
we'll get into all this. Like on some level, I hate it.
Yeah,
but,
no, I know.
but also,
All right.
the thing that
I
bugs
would
me
still
too,
say
and
go see
then
it.
we totally got to move on. I would too. I would say give
Yeah,
it a
go
chance,
see it.
and just don't expect.
That's the thing.
Whatever.
Temper your
But
expectations.
the thing that bugs me is even a movie like Elf, right?
Yeah.
In Elf, there's a million great things about Elf. There's tons of positive things you could say about Elf. But the one is that he is in that world,
Yeah.
and like everything he does is like, what would he do?
A reflection of
Not
really.
what do I want to happen now?
Yeah, what's the
what
joke?
do we need to go this way or
Yeah.
whatever? And in this movie, man, it is just the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
Like nobody lives in this world. None of them know what's happening in this world. And as much as the whole like Earth Protectorate League of
Yeah, right.
fantasy things is like, fine, that's like a funny little gag that kind of gets us more into just being action adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still just so stupid.
It is.
I mean, it's like flat Earth conspiracy
It's-
at that point,
yeah.
right? It's like it's a conspiracy theory that like half of the planet is in on,
Right.
and yet somehow no one
Right.
has leaked that information to the other half.
I would, because we do this sometimes, we should probably get back to it more. I would say, just as we're leaving it, you're pretty much getting the movie you see the trailer for. That's a pretty good representation.
Yeah,
And
I think the trailer's good, except that also it's just
it looks a little bit more adult adrenaline than the film you really
Yeah.
get, but it's not misleading. And for anyone keeping track, there's nothing secret at the end of the film. There's no, and I really thought there were going to be bonus scenes or something there, but
or like
nothing.
when the I bet when the DVD comes out,
Oh, yeah.
the gag reel
oh yeah,
for this movie
Sure.
is probably
Right.
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Because that no one in this movie is taking anything seriously at all.
right.
And like half the film of this is
I
gag
like
reel.
I like seeing Chris Evans do stuff. It's so easy to keep him as Captain America. The Rock's doing his own thing. It was originally very easy to just mentally reslot Ryan Reynolds in here, but if he hadn't gotten sort of super famous, I'm Just Ken could do this. Also known as the other Ryan.
Right, right.
But he would have been a good one in this because you just want someone with comedic timing that can play funny, like you said, the Abbott and Costello thing. So anyway. So,
All right, that took
That's
longer
round one.
than expected. Anyway, so now we're just gonna
We can do this.
kind of run through I think just because people ask, and I think because you should know, right? I think people should know
Every once in a while, it's good
the
to do this.
ideas of their movie critics other than just like reading their reviews. And the first thing actually that I always kind of lead into, especially because surprise, people ask me shit like this all the time. So,
Right.
but one thing that always comes to my mind is like, what is your job as a movie critic, right? Because I think both massive amounts of members of the public and tons of movie critics do not have at all the same idea as me
Yeah.
about what that job is. So if you read a lot of movie critics, right, it's very obvious that a lot of movie critics think their job is to tell you exactly how much they like the movie or didn't like it, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is not at all the job.
Yeah. I don't either.
I think the job of a movie critic is to let you know if you're going to like it, and depending on the movie, maybe give you some tidbits of education about
Background
movies.
or,
Like,
yeah. Right.
you know, it will obviously come out that I do like it, right? And then, like, why? Like, what are the reasons? And have some reasons that are more than just like, I like explosions.
I like lightsabers
or
whatever. Yeah.
like what was good about the movie and all that stuff. But whether or not I like it, I think it's actually irrelevant.
It's like a
right?
real side.
I think that
yeah.
I think that like when I'm writing reviews or when we're talking about it, it's probably, I don't know, a little easier when I'm writing reviews, because in a weird way there's like more time, even though there's not.
Yeah.
But like if I give something a 10,
Yeah.
you should be able to know from my 10 review that you are not going to like it. Right?
Right.
Or if I hate something, if I give something a 0, you should be able to actually get the information even from my review where I'm just telling you how much I hate it, that you will like it.
Yeah.
That you will, or at least you will like it like enough, right? It may not be your favorite movie, hopefully, right?
Right. Well,
But, you know, you will get what the movie is and how much it will appeal to you, not how much it appeals to me.
Right.
Like, how much it appeals to me is sort of where maybe some information will happen, right? Like,
yeah. But it is largely irrelevant.
Right.
Like, truly, like, yeah, if you're starting from that scope of like, so what's your job? You're like, okay, yeah.
Right.
That shouldn't be part of it at all.
But I obviously
Yeah.
have read millions of reviews,
man, yeah.
right, in my life, and even among very popular critics at very big places,
Yeah.
I've read, I can't tell you how many reviews telling me something is one of the best movies of the year, and I have no idea why at the end of it, right? And I have no idea if I will like it or not.
Yeah.
You just kept saying you like it in different ways.
Right.
That's That doesn't tell me anything. And it doesn't tell me like, you know, like how does the narrative of this movie work, or why do you believe the characters, or how are they, you know, real and actually seem like they're in that circumstance? How do they relate to the human condition or anything, or like what is good about the movie?
Yeah.
And I mean, seriously, there's like a lot of them where you read the review and you go, not any better off than I started, except that I know that he loves it. Right. I mean, I don't think that's at all the job. Like, because what does that get you? You're supposed to like read the review.
Yeah.
Not because you just, 5 stars. So he loved it, or, you know,
confirmation bias seeking, or if you're like, I really want to love this, I want to read somebody who loved it, tell me I'm making a good decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so from there on to how we rate things. Now, as I said, we've done this before, and we are different. I think over time, since it's been a huge amount of time, My theory has not really changed.
You stubborn SOB.
Since the
You
first time we did
stubborn bastard.
Exactly. So, my numbers when we're doing the reviews, and I actually kick out a 0 through 10. My number is, to what extent does a movie actually deliver what it's trying to be? And then there are like the sub parts of that.
Yeah.
For me, like, is the acting just horrible? I mean, but that's still like within the same thing because it's not delivering what it's trying to be. So because that is like the overriding thing, right? Something could be like a movie that I can't stand.
Yeah.
And it could still get a high rating.
We've had those, and you've literally said that. You're like, I hate this, but this is really succeeding at what it wants to do.
Right. And then there's like the caveat parachute ripcord pulling portion of it, which is the extent to which that is a legitimate thing to try to be.
That's the one that's always so weirdly flexible for me,
right?
Because that can save you from a bunch of weird things, but that's the deal,
right? And that's why, because the thing that always comes up, and I've tried to find other examples, but that's work that I don't want to do, like to try and think of what's another garbage thing that's whatever. But the example I always go to with that is Freddy Got Fingered.
Yeah.
Because that movie is, I think, 100% successful at being exactly what it was trying to be. There was a concept, and they nailed it.
They really went for it, and they got it.
And it's like practically perfection, right?
Yeah.
And also, there is zero extent to which that is a legitimate thing to try to be. So that is obviously, a bunch of subjective piled on top of other subjective.
Right.
And if you disagree with me, then fine. Right. But I also land for trying to just round out, I guess, how we come to things as critics and kind of giving information about, do we make any sense? Is it worth paying attention to our views or whatever? Unfortunately, we're old, right? So
we've gotten old.
I land strongly on the Gene Siskel versus Roger Ebert side of the base question, which is that Gene Siskel used to always say, there is a point at which I just get to tell you you're wrong.
Right.
If you think Freddy Got Fingered is the best movie there ever was, I just get to say you're wrong.
Right.
And it's like it's very subjective. It's like criticizing art. It's not exactly the same as like food where it just tastes disgusting and that's just
and you're
objective
weighing
or
personal objectives and differences, and
it's like is this painting good? It's like very art subjective and everything, but there is a point, and he had a movie and I can't remember what it was, but there comes a point where I just get to say you're wrong. If I say something is a 9 and you say it's a 5, then whatever, right? But if I say something's a 0 and you say it's the best movie ever, then I just get to say you're wrong. And that's just the end of it.
That's it. That's the way that goes.
So anyway, that's like the broad strokes. And I tend to pay as much attention as I can to kind of factoring most things on kind of an even scale, even though, like, if you read my reviews, if you listen to the podcast, you're not going to hear us very often going, man, the cinematography.
We purposely try. Yeah, right? We do sometimes when it's obvious, but
because it's just like, if we had like a 3-hour show and only covered one movie like every time, maybe we would do that. But I try to look at as much of what's going on in kind of an even way. Like, what I want to do is really just focus on like kind of the narrative. Like, what is the story, and is that any good? But that leaves out a lot of moviness, right? Right?
Yeah.
So I try to put like acting, directing, even editing, which doesn't often come up because you only notice it a lot when it sucks. It only stands out when it's bad. It's awful.
Yeah.
But like cinematography and like, how well was this scene directed? Did the director actually do anything here other than just film this happening? Or and I try really hard, and I fail at it like most of the time, but I try to make all of those things kind of more or less even weight, with maybe some more weight to like the narrative, because that's what's most important to me. But some films, I mean, one of those other things will just like be amazing, and you're like, well, you have to get some more points for that. Like, the one example I use of that a lot is Mr. Holmes. Because Ian McKellen is so good in that. That it almost doesn't matter. Like, the story could have been utterly stupid.
I don't care. He can go get groceries. I don't care. And the mystery could be, where are my keys? Like, I don't care.
He was so good in that it so
matter.
outshined everything else. And not that it was actually bad in other ways. But if it had been,
it didn't matter.
I wouldn't have cared. So anyway, that's kind of like a lot of wrapping up.
Which of the two? I genuinely curious. Which of the two, like, because when you come to a film and you're like, so how good is it at what it's trying to be, and how reasonable is what it's trying to be? Is it? Which of those elevated more for Red One? Like, because it's certainly trying to be a very weird movie, like a very. I mean, for 11-and-a-half-year-olds, no, you know what I mean? Like, it's really designed to be for a small window, but like, it also has a lot of things that move that needle up and down and around. Like, which of those is more effective for Red One specifically?
So I think,
does that make sense?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
I think for Red One, I think my little like parachute ripcord thing, almost never even comes up, right? It's like
in this movie,
a good in any movie. I think a good example of that coming up when it's not like a Freddy Got Fingered example is Christ, I won't remember the name of it. You know, the movie where all those, it was like last year or 2 years ago, all those kids are in the house getting murdered. And Pete Davidson's in it. Christ,
I do.
I can't remember that.
I do.
That movie, I semi pulled the ripcord on it, right? Because that movie was actually doing a pretty decent job of what it was trying to be. What it was trying to be was stupider than what could get a higher score.
It's not Ready or Not.
You know what
That's
I mean?
The Bride. Yeah. Yeah, no, I know.
That movie worked. It did what it was trying to do. It didn't have a terrible script. It had like a kind of a stupid story, but like the script was okay, you know.
Bodies.
Yeah, that's the one.
I'm trying to think of the. I'm like, I know it's 3 titles, but what the hell is it?
And that one I did kind of have to go. But look, man, what you're trying to be is like stupid. What you're trying to be is like, I want to be a movie for fairly stupid people who want to see a movie about fairly stupid people. And I'm like, nah, I can't give you like a higher score for that.
Right.
That
makes sense.
In Red One, I think, first of all, I don't know that it knew what it was trying to be. Because it had not locked that in. But for a fair amount of it, I think it just failed to be that. I think it failed to actually be what it was trying to be, because what I think ultimately, and this is sort of guesswork, right? I think what it was trying to be is that older person movie we wanted.
Yeah.
and it failed at it.
Right.
And it just had all these stupid things
got
that it
dragged
didn't
down.
think about.
Yeah.
And I think in the effort to make sure that Chris Evans got to be funny enough
Yeah.
and have some goofy scenes, with this or that, it just didn't pay attention to this other stuff. It just didn't care.
Yeah.
So it failed.
Yeah.
So it didn't even need
It
to
didn't even meet
worry
that
about,
criteria. Right. Yeah.
how's it?
That makes sense.
Anyway,
It's always funny to say this kind of thing too, because I think one of the things growing up that I liked most was finding a person who reviewed films and even books to some extent, but films, and you either like their reviews because you disagree with them, or you like them because they echo your own sentiments. So you find somebody for a small window of time. I knew a friend who really liked Owen Gleiberman, who was and it's, you're a reviewer of some sort when you can just drop names of reviewers like they're Stephen King, Jane Austen, Ernest Hemingway. Owen Gleiberman used to write for Entertainment Weekly, which was a fun magazine on pop culture that came out weekly. And I found that I shared a lot of stuff with him whenever I would read his review. I'm like, yeah, that's how I feel, and that makes sense, and this does this. And then one day he did a review that I absolutely, totally disagreed everything with him on his whole, just sort of the precipice of his whole argument, and never looked back. And I'm like, well, you're a hack. Like, I can't believe I liked anything you said,
go back
because you
and reread
fundamentally
older
don't like
things.
any of these things, and it doesn't make any sense. In a way, like he was just shilling by saying, he said something like, the new Red Dragon is better than The Silence of the Lambs, and I can tell you why. And I read that thinking, that's a bold statement, and you're wrong about everything. And I think you're just being paid by the studio because the new
Right.
Red Dragon is out. So all of that to be said, I strangely think one of the passive jobs of a reviewer is to tell you whether or not it's worth your money to buy a babysitter, to go out to dinner, to spend the valet parking, to go to a film for 2 hours, and whether or not that's going to be worth whatever amount of money you've spent. That doesn't always work anymore because there's so many streaming things. It's really just about whether or not your time is worth going to this if you like films that I like. The films that I like, you would have known by watching and listening for long enough to know that I really love Star Wars, but I don't really love Speed Racer. So if I'm watching something and I'm using that metric, if I really dug it, you might dig it too, and it might be worth checking out, but also it'll be fun to talk about. The thing that starts and ends for me is the narrative. I was an English major in college, and I think the story is everything. I think if you have a good story, that's a fundamental, fantastic starting place that can be strengthened or weakened by your casting. It can be hurt by the direction. I don't know that I necessarily want to see One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest directed by like somebody I really hate, as an example. Like, I think it all has to come together. But for me, an effective film, a successful film, a fun film, just a great time waster is when the story is worth it, the characters are believable, they act as if they are in the real situations that they're in, and that there's no like weird ghost in the machine to save bad writing or sloppy editing. It's sort of strangely easy when I say that, but then when you start putting it on the table as ingredients to something else, it can go wrong everywhere.
Yeah.
And you really have to understand that if somebody came to me years ago, and there are all these weird ones that we think of over and over again, thankfully you were more with me, or we were almost together on the same hatred of Zero Dark 30, and everybody loved that film. And I would look at that film and fundamentally, like I did with The Hurt Locker and other big darlings, that I'm not that guy that has to take a swing at what's popular. In fact, I usually like what's popular, but it has to at least make sense to me. And some people really love those. And I'm like, yeah, but when this person does that, how can you reconcile that with when they do this later? That's not the same action of anybody who would be in that world. And they're like, well, yeah, but I mean, it was good. And I'm like, all right, okay. I get it. Now saying that, one thing that we always say when we talk about these things is we have soft spots. The easiest one that we've laughed about forever for you is Hudson Hawk, and for me is The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. I'll speak about Ford Fairlane and say it's not a great movie. It's a really dumb, and I don't mean airplane kind of dumb movie, which is a genius movie. I mean, there's just something about it. It hit me the right way at the right time. I thought it was fun. It just always stayed with me. And even upon rewatches, which I don't do it that many times, I've still found some sort of affection for it. Right. So it's just an Achilles heel for me against everything that I think is important when reviewing something. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes I just like hitting the slummy part of a video rental, and that's the easiest one to go to. And I know you've talked about, Hudson Hawk being sort of the same way. I just think for the most part, coming around to a film, when I see it, I know where it starts ebbing and flowing. And when I'm watching it, it's either getting better or worse. I don't always start at 10 and then start giving like demerits. I feel like I start at 5. Like, this is going to be an average film. It's not going to be extraordinarily good or bad until it starts showing me, until I start believing what it's showing me. And then it goes up or it goes down.
Right.
And sometimes the gulf that we've talked about that you mentioned in our 7s is 7 is just such a wide landing strip because it can be really, 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 really fun and just faulted. Or it can be very funny and just dumb, like an easy early Jim Carrey film is just easy to pick on. But, when you watch it later, you're like, it's not so bad,
I think that...
So anyway, that's where I start.
As far as the whole 7 brigade.
Yeah.
Because we talk about 7s a lot.
We could almost do a show just on 7s.
And we give a lot of 7s.
We do give a lot of 7s.
For me and the way I rate things, I think that 7 is such a big, giant number. In 7 out of 10 is such a big place because for me, things are kind of instantly locked into that 7.
Yeah.
If I could have made it better really easily.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep,
I agree.
If there's a movie, the movie has to be doing a lot of things right. It has to have a lot of stuff going for it.
Yep.
And there will be stuff where I'm like, this just should have been at least 9.
Yeah.
So hard.
And so effortlessly.
Right.
Why didn't it?
And so easily.
Yeah.
That then all of a sudden it's just like kind of 7 becomes 10 for this movie.
Right, because it's the
and
best
it made
it could
it.
be. Right.
And it got there because it just should have done something differently. I think as far as just throwing out some more information like you were talking about, Ford Fairlane, there are a ton of movies that, because we're people, no matter how unbiased we try to be.
Oh, God, yeah.
There are movies that, like you said, even just keeps happening, right?
Yeah.
That I'm like, I don't know, man. This movie is just something. It's like it was made for me.
Right.
One of the movies that really stands out, well, actually, there's 2. One of them I feel is completely justified. Which is About Time, which I loved, right? And it did not get the love from other people that it got from me, but it had everything, and it just hit me. Like, I think it's legitimately a 10, but then I also think it's like a biased 10.
Right.
Both.
Right.
Because it's just like,
told me about it.
But the other thing that always jumps out at me, because I like this movie way more than I can figure out a way to rate it.
Yeah.
Indian Summer.
Oh yeah.
Because that movie is like
that's a blast.
That movie is like
it's great.
7-ish.
Sure.
In like a really legitimate way.
Sure.
Right. Because it just doesn't have that much going for it, actually. Right? It doesn't have that many, like, real positives. The acting is really good.
Yeah.
But it's really good.
Right.
It's a bunch of actors who, are serious actors who are legitimate, who I'm not changing their careers by saying they're good because everybody knows. Right. It's got all kinds of people in it, and it's got a pretty cool script, but not like a great script. But it's kind of like this, mid kind of throwaway fun kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I just love that movie.
Yeah.
Like that's a movie where if it comes on, I'm like, how far in it is it? And am I going to watch it again? Because it just, I don't know. That is just like a totally biased thing. Like the Hudson Hawk and Ford Fairlane movies are like the movies that just are bad.
Those
but
are
we like them
exceptions to the
anyway,
rule, right? Yeah, right.
But there are tons of other movies that are like, they're 5 to 7.
Some of the best.
But also, it's like someone made them for me. And another one is, except that I really like this one too, is crap. What's that movie? It's like Here We Go or something. It's Maya Rudolph's in it, and I think it might be called Here We Go.
Yeah.
It's right around there. That movie was just like, did I write this movie?
Right.
Like everything that happened in this movie is like shit that I quote all the time.
Yeah, right.
Because it's
well, this
so perfectly
as
for
another
me.
quick addendum before we end up getting out of here or going too long. It also goes to explain what you just said. For why sometimes a film hits that gulf of just being, you don't know what it is. I can watch a 10 and just be so wowed by it because everything was perfect and I thought everything was in place and it was just so absolutely effective and worth your time. But I never think about it again. And then I can watch a film that might be a hard, like, it would probably be better than that. But the easiest thing that I think of is when I saw Sneakers, which has like Dan Aykroyd, River Phoenix. It's got tons of everybody in it. It's many years old now. I watched that film and something clicked with me and I kept going back. I think I watched that thing like 7 times in the theater. I loved that movie. It wasn't a 10.
Right.
It just felt great at maybe 7.5. If I watched it, now I've got the fondness of it to dissuade me. But back then, it wasn't the best film I saw that year, but that would be on my list and it would beat other 10s. Because another thing that a film, in order for me to think of our lists about, is how much do I think about it? How much do I think about it after I've seen it? How hard is it for me to recall a week later to review it?
Right.
Sometimes we see a film and I'm like, I got to Wikipedia that. I don't even remember it. And we saw it 3 nights ago. Like, it was so forgettable. Doesn't mean it was bad. It just didn't stick with me. And others are absolutely like ingrained now in my DNA of entertainment that I can't think of anything except them. And those are the films that usually get a higher rating just because of that.
Well, especially like a movie where, later that night you're thinking about it or like the next day. And all of a sudden you start like remembering other things or like thinking about other things.
Right.
Or, that's
telling people
that's got to be
it.
Some kind of a positive, right?
Yeah, right.
So before we take off, I also want to just throw out, since we were talking about other critics, and I like to bag on other critics, and
you're gonna bring up
if you've been listening for a long time, you know that for a while we were doing this critic takedown thing, which I would love to do, but I feel like I'm not gonna go
picking a
out
fight
and do it. Like if people sent us like reviews,
that's right.
I might look at getting into that again. I'll have to write up something to put on Are You Screening to have people, I don't know,
that was always fun.
Investigate for us.
Because somebody would send us things.
But no, the thing that I was going to say about that is, like, as I was talking about at the beginning, that what is the job, right, of being a movie critic? And I think you can kind of relate to your movie critic or whatever. I think how I feel about the job anyway is like, and this is great, like you can't really disagree with me, right?
Right.
Like if I say something's good.
Right.
And you read my review and then you go, you're wrong, it was garbage. Yeah, but did you know that it was that you were going to hate it from reading my review, right? It's not that I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Because I did my job, not if I'm right about whether it's good or not.
Right.
But whether or not you knew ahead of time.
Yeah,
right. But and that doesn't like come to fruition enough, right? But or the opposite way, I mean, it's funny actually because there's way more emails or responses or whatever to critics when I don't like something that they like, than there is when I like something and they don't like it. It's really when I don't like something, right? But did you know you were going to like it
Right.
from reading
Right.
the review? Well, then, I mean,
I guess.
I
Here
did
you
my
go.
job.
You're right. I always like it when I'll sit down and we'll do the show and you're like, so somebody's going to call you out for something you said. And I'm like, great, here we go.
Yep.
Let's hear it. Because I love it, but absolutely, if you have anything that you want to send in and you want us to take a look at, send it in. That was always a fun part of the show.
But
us going out and looking at people just seems like we're just trying to start shit.
Right.
And that's not necessary or professional, unless that's the avenue of the show, and that's not necessarily what we're doing.
Yeah.
So.
But and we're gonna take off. But I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, the more I'm interested suddenly in doing that.
Yeah.
If you read a review by
Right.
someone and you think this review tells me nothing and you're not
Right.
doing your job at all, then send it to us. Send
We'll
us
take
a
a
link
look.
to it.
We'll
and,
take a look.
and we'll let you know what we think.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been listening to us for a long time, you'll know that I have famously taken apart Roger Ebert several times on the show.
Vicious. Doesn't even matter that the guy's dead.
Because a lot of his reviews, I think, are awful. I think a lot of his reviews are great. It's just like you were saying about Gleiberman.
It was Oren
Like
Gleiberman, yeah.
there are a lot of reviews you read and you were like, these are good, and then suddenly they're like his Indiana Jones and the
Right.
Crystal
That
Skull,
was
and he
it,
was
yeah.
like, this is great. And
Yeah.
at no point in his really long review did he ever give me a reason to think it was great, except that he was like, those old movies,
Right.
they were fantastic.
I remember
Gleiberman
and Stephanie Zacharek and I mean, just so Peter Travers at Rolling Stone. That guy got sort of famous from being the guy from Rolling Stone.
Right.
But anyway. Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, and if you have questions about what we just told you, like if you actually want to punch a hole through or ask something else about, like, well, if you're reviewing
you
a
can
movie,
either
let us know.
You can either leave a comment on this, or you can go to ruscreening.com and there's a whole comment form, the whole whatever. Next week, I'm not sure what we're going to be doing because we're kind of getting closer to the end of the year, so we could be hitting that part of the year where we end up doing many reviews at
Several
once.
at once,
and trying to keep up on all the stuff before Critics' Choice voting starts, which will be fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. Please, like, subscribe, share this on wherever you're listening to it.
On the
share
socials.
Share it with other people. Yeah.
Right.
And we'll see you next week.
Right.
Thanks.
Bye.